So, he gets back on the highway to find it, and sure enough, when he pulls off to check, he's able to identify that it's hers within seconds. And that's when he tells detectives he got out of his car, went to the driver's side, and opened the door. Perfect. His fingerprints are now on it. I mean, not that they wouldn't have been. They probably both drove the car at some point. They lived together. But just wait. As soon as he opens the door, he looks inside and notices there's a broken console. There's blood on the door. He also spots a picture of Latrice from Christmas, crumpled up and lying on the back seat. Then, that's when the law enforcement officers arrived at Latrice's car, meeting up with Darren after they had just come from the nearby homicide scene. I don't know about you, but it sounded a little too coincidental. And that's what detectives were thinking as well. Darren somehow arrives at his wife's car, his deceased wife's car, his murdered wife's car, before the detectives. The car is also considered a crime scene, so he's at the scene of a crime. With a story like this one, that would be pretty convenient if he were the one who did this, wouldn't it? Oh no, it wasn't me. I just got here. Like I'm just checking up on my wife. Why didn't you do that last night? They followed normal procedure. They asked Darren to allow them to examine his clothing, as well as his body, his arms, hands, etc., to see if there's a sign that any kind of altercation happened. And there are no marks on him. His clothes are clean. They take photos of him, and he's completely willing to allow them to take a DNA sample. But they are pressing him even harder. After that, they want to put pressure on him. They want to know, what was your relationship like with your wife? And by the way, that morning, while all of this is going on, Latrice's father, Sherman, is also about to find out what happened to his daughter. His morning started out differently than Darren's. The first thing that Sherman does when he wakes up is turn on the news to see what's going on. And that day, the first thing he sees is a breaking news report. He sees that scene, the stretch of highway right near Wake Tech Community College. He sees the exit sign, the yellow crime scene tape, and the technicians kneeling next to a blue tarp. There's text on the screen that reads, "Body found on I-540. But this doesn't faze Sherman because these things happen. There was no reason he would have ever expected this to be his own daughter underneath that tarp. But sadly, it was. Sherman gets a call from Darren asking if he knew where Latrice was, and Sherman's thinking, she's your wife. You are her husband. You live with her. Shouldn't you be the one that knows where your wife is? Darren's like, no. And he told him about the night before. Sherman is stunned. He cannot fathom going to sleep and not even thinking about waking up to make sure that your wife made it home safely. He thinks it's really odd, and it makes him angry. So Sherman calls the university, and he gets transferred to a security guard who tells him, you should probably get in touch with the sheriff's department. Sherman is confused. He's like, what for? Why the sheriff's office? The first thing that usually comes to mind is that your child has gotten themselves into trouble. And remember, Sherman was a former juvenile detention officer, so it's in his instinct to assume Latrice had done something wrong. When he calls the sheriff says, you need to come down to the station. So Sherman and his wife jump in the car, and they are speechless the entire drive. They didn't say one single word to each other, and they arrived there around 11 o'clock in the morning. Someone from the station greets them and puts them into a room. Finally, after quite some time, an officer comes in and tells them the horrible news about their daughter. They said the body that was found on the side of I-540 was identified that morning as their daughter, Latrice. Worse yet, her parents find out that Darren had already been there to visually identify their daughter, and he didn't say one single word. They didn't hear one single word from that man. Nothing. Sherman is pissed, and rightfully so. The police wouldn't even let Latrice's parents see her body because they were not listed as her next of kin. Her husband was. It's devastating. Sherman thinks that Darren just nonchalantly went to sleep, not caring about Latrice at all, and that was his biggest fear, that this man wasn't the right one, that he wasn't going to be there to protect his daughter. They didn't get to see Darren that day, but Sherman wanted to see him for sure, and I think you might know why. Because he wanted to give him more than just a piece of his mind.